This seems like a lot of what the best intentions of like the hashtag resistance and the what is it called, the Indivisible groups did, at least early on, where they're like, we're going to protest the inauguration, we're going to have the women's march, we're going to have these like early shows of force for the Trump administration that seemed like they did good at, you know, signs and protest and discourse. But when it came towards like the next step that you're like seem to be kind of getting at of like claiming real and tangible power, those movements fell short, and then like they became a pejorative of like doing that, of promising a lot and trying to whip up a frenzy, but ultimately falling short and caving in to many of the same pressures that got us to this issue in the first place. So is there anything you think you can learn from movements like Indivisible or things like that that have even happened as counter insurgencies to the Trump administration? And do you think that's something that Hold the Line can sort of help to remedy?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful movements that have had sustained impact for years to come, I think are led by those who are directly impacted. I think one of the places where like the Women's March and like other, efforts fall short is that they didn't represent like the most impacted people in this country. Like those people were not involved, honestly. Like I'm always fascinated by conversations I have with white women, for example, at how confident they are in like just being able to get something done or get like an elected official to listen to them. And then I go and I listen to like my mom's like auntie friends, and it's just like it is a completely different narrative. Like they're experiencing completely something so different because that indivisible guy just didn't land in front of in their world. It's just not a part of their world, and no one really tried to put it in their world. And I think that is one of the biggest flaws. Like those communities, nobody really made an effort to put those resources and these tactics and these strategies, put it in their world and translate it to for them to use. I mean, like I think about I speak a lot from like my own immigrant like parent experience. Like my family, like our families knew, like they know what movement is, like they know what resistance looks like, they know what like holding like a government accountable looks like. But when they come here, it's like completely like foreign to them, right? But nobody tried to like invite them to the party, or even let them be a part of the party if they were trying to do it themselves. So I think that's the biggest flaw. And I think I don't have an answer, I guess, to like how the Hold the Line guide is essentially going to not do what those other guides did. I think I guess my answer is get in front of the people who are directly impacted in this country and get this guide in front of them and make it work for them and accessible to them. Like that is like my goal, honestly. Like, and that is like I also just need to figure that out too. I think we as a group are still figuring that out. Like, how do you actually do that? If you think about it, like the people that wrote this guide, there's like three Desi people in that group and like one white guy. Um, and like that, like most of them are with a wide like very like with difference in ages and stuff. Like slightly different economic backgrounds, but obviously we're not representative of like the most directly impacted people in this country, right? And so this is a challenge that we are constantly coming up against. Like, how do you actually get something like this in front of those people in a way that's not like colonizing them? Honestly, I think like a lot of movements have like this subtle like version of like colonization that they still carry on with them. So that is a question that I mean I have not figured it out yet either. But I think that whoever figures that out, and hopefully we can figure that out. Once we do, like it will definitely solve for a lot of the problems that you talked about.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's a big balance because even I notice as being like adjacent and seeing a lot of the strides that movements like Democratic Socialists of America have had in like building a political force, along with the downsides in that it is still struggling as being in a lot of places a very white movement and a movement that is led still very top down instead of bottom up as we would like a more like equitable sort of like organization of movement to be. There's always that question of like organization versus disorganization. That could be like a separate podcast we could both do and talk to about in great lengths, I'm sure. But I think about like how do we break past this extremely online, super hyper focused into politics bubble that like, for lack of a better phrase, like you and I and at least half the people who are going to end up seeing this guide are going to be a part of. And I think it's just about making sure that like sports fans talk to other sports fans, more particularly like hockey fans talk to other hockey fans, or like basketball fans talk to other basketball fans. But usually like political people only talk to other political people, when instead that's our problem. We need to expand the political universe, and that means uncomfortable conversations or even comfortable conversations with people you haven't talked to, or who are your neighbors or your coworkers, or people who you think you could move the needle on any of these issues, to help them say like, hey, politics is like an active thing, and even if we disagree on some issues here or there, we can unite on like the most important ones about class injustice and racial injustice and all the other like sort of social inequality issues in this country, and fight to at least have a leveler playing field for where we do disagree. I think just like what you're saying right there, that figuring out where to break outside of our own existing bubbles when we're educating other people about these things is like the next frontier for these things. And comedy has worked a little bit. Different forms of doing a political thing, like some people like The Weekly or these other things like that, and I hope Power Report's one of those as well. But yeah, I think that would be the next big frontier, is like, how do you expand the universe of politically engaged people who are willing to make this step beyond like armchair activism and really get involved.
Yeah, and I think like if you look at the history of movements, they weren't based off of political people talking to political people. It was literally like your neighbor checking up on you and just making sure you were okay. Or like, you know, like your coworker or something, like the farm workers movement, for example, like all the coworkers got together and they did something together, you know? And so it's like my tip actually for watchers, or this is a podcast, yes. So, listeners
and watchers, because they'll be on video too. But whoever's
it
in
is
the
a video
audience,
podcast,
yes.
right? So, my tip for watchers and listeners and anyone who picks up this guide is actually challenge yourself to go outside of that comfort zone and knock on your neighbor's door. Find the people who you interact with in your daily life. Like, I don't know, like if you see like the same person you walk by on the street, like every Saturday for your walk, like, I don't know, the barista who like makes your coffee, or like, you know, like, or if like the customer that you see like at your job or something, like literally like the regular people that show up in your life, that you have like these subtle traditions with in a way, reach out to them, because you already have a relationship with them. And community organizing doesn't start with issues, it starts with relationships. And that is what we've seen throughout history. That's what all the research shows. People are not actually like, people don't join organizations because they're just passionate about the issue. They oftentimes actually join them because they're going to find community in there, in that organization, and they're going to find a place where they feel welcomed. And so that is that's the tip I would just give to people. Like, have those conversations with the regular people in your life, and don't just go find like the one political person that's already on your side, essentially, and already thinking about these things.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like we said about just expanding the political universe, but also like when you are doing the work, the tough work of actually doing activism, it helps when you have a community of people you're working with who like you don't hate and you like agree with on certain things, and you can actually work together on stuff. It turns out that's helpful to run an organization when you do those things. Take notes, Congress. But like I think it also getting at that aspect that we, in a lot of ways, are lacking a lot of sense of community in this country. I think, again, because of American exceptionalism, hell of a drug. Like, we're learned to be individualist, and even that kind of mindset teaches a lot about like religious fundamentalism, and it really centers like Christianity-centric sort of like ideology in its way of being an individual American. But yeah, we, even with COVID notwithstanding, we have fewer places where people can get together and really spend time as a community. I mean, work isn't really that place because the power dynamics are kind of off. It's not really like that really exists at bars or a lot of social things, and many of those other social things where people just usually just randomly meet together are not really in existence because of COVID. So activism is the next fun thing to do to get closer to your community, I guess, but it's also just something that's like more fun and more productive than being on like your neighborhood watch or your local housing homeowners association. That's the phrase I'm looking for. This has been like a good example of like the 4 places about Hold the Line. Again, holdthelineguide.com is where folks can kind of find information about this.